Hello, John. How you doing?
Hey Glenn, how are you?
Doing very well. It's a rainy Friday afternoon. This is Glenn Loury here in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown University, and I'm talking with John McWhorter of Columbia University. We are at the Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv. The black guys at bloggingheads.tv, we like to fancy ourselves, and here to talk about all manner of politics, culture, race, and so on, as is our wont. So, John, thanks for joining the Glenn Show.
My pleasure. Yeah.
I was very impressed, John, by a piece that you put out last week in the Daily Beast, offering your assessment of what's going on the college campuses, what with various speakers not being permitted to speak. Everyone knows about what happened at Berkeley with Milo Yiannopoulos, the provocateur. They may also know what happened at Middlebury College with Charles Murray, the social scientist of the bell curve fame. They may even know what happened at UCLA and Claremont McKenna, as I recall, with Heather McDonald, your former colleague at the Manhattan Institute, who writes about policing and Black Lives Matter type issues. What happened in all these instances is that very powerful anti-conservative speech demonstrations took place, which disrupted and physically imperiled some of these speakers and engendered a wide discussion on which you've commented. I thought we might devote our time today to talking a little bit about this issue and especially to exploring the argument that you make in this piece in the Daily Beast. Are you up to that?
I think I can do it. And actually, there's one of these episodes that you left out, which was what happened when Ray Kelly of the New York Police Department tried to speak at your university, Brown. That was a precursor to what has now become, if you think about it, a norm. That was extreme then. And I think that was that 2013? Maybe 2000?
That was, let me see, we're in 2017. That might have been 2013 or 2014 at the latest.
And they refused to let him even speak. And you were appalled, and I remember we discussed it. Now,
we did discuss it. You're right. It's a famous incident. Give me a moment just to say something on that, because I was in the room. Not only was I in the room, I was in the front row of the auditorium. I was there only because I'd come late to the event, and they had set aside some seats for dignitaries in the front. Not that I'm a dignitary, but I appealed on my Professor Loury basis, and I got into the auditorium, and I got a seat up there in the front, where there were a lot of uniformed cops who had been invited by the organizers to, pay respect to the Commissioner of Police from New York City, Raymond Kelly at that time. And the issue was stop and frisk policing, and there was fierce, in demonstration outside the auditorium, no justice, no peace, no racist police, and all this. But inside the auditorium, a group of well-organized and disciplined disruptors, some of them from the community, Providence City, and some from the campus, periodically and systematically, interrupted Kelly's speech. He wasn't permitted to speak. Yes, that was before the University of Missouri demonstrations. It was before the Ferguson, Missouri got the wrong verdict demonstrations and stuff like that. And it was a precursor of this thing. So anyway, that was Brown University. I only left it out because I'm a partisan. I believe in protecting the reputation of my institution, which was definitely besmirched by the fact that the commissioner of police in the city of New York, a city of 8 million people, appointed by Michael Bloomberg, 3 times elected as mayor of the city, couldn't even offer his case for how he polices the city of New York because it was presumptively such a racist and, almost borderline fascist enterprise that was being engaged in by the New York City Police Department, over which he was in charge. Such a presumptively racist and fascist enterprise that they were engaged in, that of course he shouldn't be permitted to speak at Brown University. Such was the attitude of students and faculty at my home university. So that did happen.
What I think about those episodes and what I wrote about in the Daily Beast piece is that I think that we're arguing past those students and the community members who joined them and their fellow travelers by saying you're shutting down free speech. I mean, we've been making that argument. That argument has been made in all respectable organs by people from all sides of the political spectrum. So it's even leftists who are saying that this kind of behavior interferes with free speech. And yet, the same groups of people keep doing these things on campuses. And if anything, over the past 6 months, it's gotten worse. And so they're not listening. And yet, it's obvious that these people understand that on a basic level, people should be allowed to have their say. And it's clear that on some level, I mean, if these are reasoning people, and they definitely are, and they are usually exceptionally intelligent people, they have to understand that, say, for example, Heather McDonald standing behind a podium and saying some things from her books for 45 minutes and taking some questions doesn't threaten anything. So the idea that some speech cannot be permitted extending to someone like Heather McDonald is obviously extreme. And I think that what we need to understand is that there's an element of acting in this kind of protest. The idea is not that anybody truly believes that Heather McDonald making her case behind a podium would be the equivalent of Hitler being given his own TV show on CNN to a populace. Nobody thinks that. What those people are doing is they are not allowing someone to speak as a kind of physical enactment of a preference that ideas like that were not in the air and that you wish to eliminate them. So the idea is we want to get rid of these ideas. And the way we're going to demonstrate it is by physically not allowing those ideas to be expressed as a heightened way of indicating our opposition to this kind of speech. So they're pretending, in a way, that this kind of speech is more dangerous and of more immediate harm than it is. They're making a theatrical statement. And I think that it's a highly obnoxious one, but it means that to keep on saying you're interfering with free speech doesn't reach them and it doesn't apply to what they're doing because they are engaging in a kind of performance art. And it's for that that I think they need to be criticized. We need to tell them that this performance art, this protesting in quotation marks, when it's going to get to the point that you're threatening someone like Charles Murray in a small space in the same way that black men in jails were threatened with lynch mobs. When you're going to take it this far, the performance art isn't cute anymore, and you're not making a statement that's helpful in any way other than calling attention to yourselves as obnoxious. So that's what I wrote in the piece.
Okay, let me see if I understand you. You're saying it's not really about speech, or at least not about trying to abridge somebody's right to speak. You're saying, let me see if I understand you, correct me, that they're acting out, that they want to go through something, they want to remonstrate, they want to present themselves in a particular way, they want to express, but they're not. They don't even really believe that Charles Murray or Heather McDonald are somehow the precursors of a fascist takeover that's going to roll back all of the advancement of the last 75 years.
Right, they couldn't.
They couldn't possibly believe that. So this is not about discourse. This is not about deliberation. It's not about argument. It's about performance. And the only way to preclude it is not reasoning with them about the forum, about what the conditions for ideal deliberation and truth-seeking should be, but rather by disabusing them of the idea that they're entitled to act out and perform whenever they have the feeling that that's a good thing to do. Am I following you?
Almost, except we have to be very specific in terms of what we mean by perform. It starts with an idea that racist ideas or ideas that foster racism ideally would not be part of the sphere of discussion. Ideally, those ideas would not exist. Then the next step with a lot of these people is, well, we are going to enact getting rid of those ideas by making sure that these people can't even make their voices heard when they're invited to campus, because this will be the way we can show how committed we are to eliminating these sorts of ideas. We will pretend that the very utterance of them is noxious in some way, and we are inviting all of you to basically participate in the pretense. And so it's a physical enactment of a mental schema. And that to me is one of the definitions that of this being performance art rather than a straight, coherently assumed statement. So it's a performance, not just in the sense of acting out because they feel like, getting their hormones out or making a loud statement. They're showing that they're committed to the elimination of these ideas. One way that you might do that is by putting on a kind of a show where you physically eliminate the speaker. But that's performative, and it's uncivil, it's unconstructive, and all the other arguments that we could make. But we have to understand that to an extent, they're acting. And they can be made to understand that on a certain level, especially if you say, are you a weak person? Last time I heard, you were talking about what a strong black woman or a strong black man you were, and there are all sorts of Frederick Douglass quotes and things that we can string out. Apparently this doesn't apply because you're implying that you can't even stand to hear somebody say some words.
Okay, so now what about the violence, John?
What about the violence?
What about the violence? What about the Antifa, the black bloc? I'm talking about the people who put masks on and who go around and throw barriers through windows and who spray paint ATM machines and who sucker punch Richard Spencer type white nationalist and who otherwise indicate when the campus security people stand down and the municipal police department stand aside that they're prepared to hurt people, destroy property, and create mayhem on behalf of their fiercely embraced ideals. Are they also performing?
Yes. I think that especially the white and non-black ones, when we're talking about racism, are saying, look, we understand that racism is a scourge. We understand that we bear a white privilege that we're responsible for. And so watch us show that we think of these ideas as being as horrible as the ideas of Hitler. We're going to pretend that these are exactly the kinds of ideas that Hitler put forth, and so we're going to break things, we're going to threaten people physically, we're actually going to put some people in the hospital. Look at how we really understand. It's part of that thing that we've been talking about in general, where it's the religion of a certain kind of non-black person to show that they have the gospel. With the black students who are doing it, I think that what it is it is a way of feeling important. It's a way of feeling special. It's a way of working out an identity to show I am a victim, and the ways that I'm a victim are relatively abstract, but I'm going to show you that I am deeply suffering in a way that I know you will be receptive towards. This could only happen after that.
So, John, let me just ask you. I'm pushing back now a little bit.
Sure.
Because the violence, for me, is not simply showing something, not simply acting out in a way that expresses or conveys that I stand on the right side of the history, that I have the right ideals, that I'm fiercely opposed to something that's wrong. The violent acting out is hatred. It is not simply a rejection of an idea, not merely expressing contempt for an idea. It is a determination to extirpate the expression of an idea. Mm-hmm. It's hatred. There's an opposition here, the fascists, the racists. And oh, by the way, who are these fascists and racists? I just want to ask you. It's not just that Heather McDonald doesn't threaten anybody. There's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with Heather McDonald. There's nothing fascist about Heather McDonald. There's nothing racist about Heather McDonald. This point actually needs to be dwelled upon. Mm-hmm. All right? The idea that your view about policing is that the cops are doing a good job in New York City keeping the streets safe, and one way they do it is by inconveniencing citizens from time to time to see what's in their pockets, is not racist. It may be bad policing. We can have a discussion about that if you all will allow it, but it's not racist, okay? When you label it racist, you're not merely expressing your hurt feeling. You're not merely signaling to your compadres that you are on the right side of history. You're trying to determine the outcome of a political process by force. Let me just put a fine point on this. They are the fascists. The people who storm auditoriums. What happened to Heather McDonald at, was it UCLA or Claremont? I can't remember which one. her talk had to be moved to another venue. And the fascists, the thugs, the anti-intellectual know-nothings, whose investment in deliberation is exactly zero, and who were hell-bent by force on having their way, banged on the doors and the windows of the room she was in so that her message could not be delivered even in absentia of an audience. They didn't want her to have the space to be able to deliver a message. These people have no arguments. They are not interested in getting the right answer to any question. They're interested by force in delimiting the range of questions that can be asked and the set of people who can ask them. I'll stop in a moment, but I think you see where I'm coming from. Your view is you have a subjective psychoanalytic account of what's going on in the minds of these people. Frankly, I give a damn what's going on in their minds. What I care about is the sticks and brickbats that they have in their hands. I care about their masked faces. I care about the rage and the vitriol that oozes from them. And I care about the fact that they're roaming American campuses, exercising prerogatives without any real opposition from anybody. They are the fascists. They are the racists. Okay, now I don't really care what anybody who hears me saying this has to say in response, because I'm not performing. This on my part is not a performance. I want a rebuttal of what I'm saying.
Well,
there's not. I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. Heather McDonald is not a racist. Charles Murray is not a racist. He might be right or he might be wrong. You think that you can preclude an examination of the questions that somebody like Heather McDonald or Charles Murray want to ask by using words? You know, I am furious, as you can see, at the imposition of these people upon institutions that are in existence for the pure and simple purpose of getting to the bottom of questions that are difficult, questions that have been troubling us for centuries. That's what the universities are for. The universities are there to get us in a disciplined and organized way to the bottom of these things. These people, these know-nothings, these ignoramuses are cutting that process short. I wanted to debate Ray Kelly at Brown University about how to police a city of 8 million people. That was not allowed to happen because these idiots think they already know the answer.
They're not idiots. But I think one thing you're missing is one of the points that we keep coming back to is that they consider race to be an exception to all of this. So as far as they're concerned, there needs be no discussion. As soon as somebody has said Heather McDonald is a racist because she's on the side of the same police who killed, any number of names that we could recite. To be on the side of the police means that she must be a racist. Time is limited. How much energy are we going to spend engaging her ideas closely? She simply must be shut down. And for them, that's how you treat the issue of certain isms. And there are no questions asked. Glenn, I don't know how much MSNBC you watch. And I don't know, we might teach different kinds of classes. But some of the seminars that I teach in American Studies where, and I think you get to know some of the students up close, where you've got 12 or 14 people at the table, you really can see that for people like this, combating discrimination against the other really is a religious service above and beyond any other way that one could be a good person outside of one's own living room. That's how important it is to people. And so these people are not thugs in the sense that you're saying. They think that these issues float high and above any consideration of civility, except they don't. The fact is that having Heather McDonald having to run undercover as if she was about to come to campus with a gun herself is, in the logical sense, absurd. These people are going through a religious ceremony in the same way as so much is symbolic in a religious ceremony. They're in costumes, they're performing actions because they're showing their Lord. And it's interesting, I wonder who the Lord is, but they're showing their Lord that they are good people. I can't hate them for that the way you hate them, because they think that what they're doing, it goes beyond the bounds of logic and
I
discussion. Is
hope
that
I
so?
don't hate them, John. I mean, of course, I'm angry and I'm frightened, and therefore I'm protecting myself, and so maybe a little bit of adrenaline is flowing and so forth. I hope I don't hate them. You know. But John, here's one point, and you've made this point in past conversations that we've had. You've said about Black Lives Matter. With the bodies dropping, and Chicago is not the only place. Homicide is up the last couple of years, not up to the heights that it was in the early 1990s, but it's up. It's significantly up. This is the so-called Ferguson effect. This is what Heather McDonald thinks. Police are pulling back because of all the scrutiny that they're getting, and there's more mayhem. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I think it may be too early to tell. It's not obviously wrong, in my opinion, but it's not.
I may break in very quickly.
Yeah, of course.
Heather book, The War on Cops, which I have read,
Yes.
and actually makes the case pretty nicely that there is a Ferguson effect. Anyway, go ahead. That's a good solution.
I agree. I blurred that book, actually, truth be told, and admire the seriousness with which she engages these issues. That doesn't make her right about everything, but I'm largely sympathetic to the case that she makes. But that's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm saying, and you were making this point in previous discussion, that we've got all these black lives. Okay, so you're saying people are concerned about racism, and that it's such a high priority to them. They regard the morality that's at stake in the debates that we have about race to be of such a central aspect to their understanding of right living in our society that they are moved to extremes. And I just wonder whether the outcomes matter that much to people. Because, as I say, the bodies are mounting. I mean, for example, New York City, and the statistics have been cited, homicide is way down, way down, way down. I mean, it's like a quarter, a fifth of what it used to be. Okay, now the NYPD has something to do with that. No sensible account of what has happened can avoid engaging with the issue of what happened with the police and how do they do. If I were trying to study this issue in any city, I'd want to look. We could parse all of the different, zero tolerance policing, quality of life policing, stop and frisk policing, proactive policing. That was the title of Raymond Kelly's lecture that he was not permitted to give at Brown. Proactive policing. CompStat, where they get the statistics and they reallocate the police force and the incentives. You'd have to engage with all of that. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in how to police a city. Angela Davis says on college campuses to raving throngs, I saw this at Brown, we should abolish prisons. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, in the case of what happened at Brown, I was there. Nobody asked her, what would you do about securing the safety of people who live in high crime neighborhoods, like most poor black people? Mm-hmm. You might think that getting dangerous, violent offenders off the street who are hurting people, whether you call it a prison or a recovery home for being a dangerous and violent offender who hurts people, hardly matters to me, would at least be on the screen of such individuals, and they would at least say, oh, yeah, well, we're going to get rid of prisons, but, and then they would have a codicil in which they explain what they were going to do about the dangerous, violent, murderous, homicidal people who prey upon those who can't afford to move to a safer neighborhood. They would at least engage the issue. They don't. They don't engage the issue. I'm not persuaded that they actually care about the outcomes. I do think that they care about power, however. And I think that they're grappling with, and I'll stop, I know I've been going on. I think they're grappling with the failures of 40 or 50 years of liberalism, which has spoon-fed black people a pablum that has resulted in our dependency and has willfully ignored overwhelming facts that ought to have required significant redress. So when Ta-Nehisi Coates says to Mitch Landrieu out at the Aspen Ideas Festival a few years ago, when Landrieu confronted him with the evidence of black-on-black homicide in New Orleans and said, there's got to be more to it than just racism, We're trying to clear these homicide cases. We got to help me figure out how to stop these folks from killing each other. And he says there's nothing wrong with black people that ending white supremacy wouldn't fix.
And I'll bet everybody clapped.
That's not an argument. That's not an engagement with the deaths of hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of black people. That's not grappling with the bitter fruit of failed policies over a half century that have contributed to this awful malaise. Okay? When somebody points out that there aren't any blacks, or not many, not enough to count at places like Caltech and MIT, but there are a gazillion Asians there, some of whose parents just got off the boat 30 years ago, quote unquote, off the boat. And somebody points that out, and they say, there are not enough outstanding African American intellectual performers as we would expect that there should be, given the opportunities that exist in society. And the answer is you're a racist when somebody says black neighborhoods in cities throughout this country are in desperate straits in this great country of opportunity. There's no opportunity there. I'm going to fix it. And the response is you're a racist for calling attention to these things. These people are not interested in solutions. They're interested in power, and they're interested in covering their ass. They're interested in controlling the narrative and telling me and you and everybody else how to think.
I don't go with you on the power. I don't think that that's what's driving them, because remember, we're talking about an enormous range of personality types. And I don't think the power analysis would apply, frankly, to most of them. You're quite correct that results has nothing to do with it anymore. A very interesting sci-fi novel or movie would be to bring a black activist from the year 1960 into today in 2017, and not 1860, just 1960. Person is, smoking, they've got television, the beginning of computers, and just to have them see how race is discussed today, where there's so little concern for actually helping people, and so much concern for just saying certain things that show that you understand the gospel, whatever color you are. It would shock a lot of activists from back then, the famous ones and the ones who we don't know. Bayard Rustin would be disgusted at where we are at this point. You're right. Results has nothing to do with it. Now, if you say something about results, people will pay a certain lip service, but all of it has gone inward. The objective has become subjective. Politics has become personal. All of it, 96% of the discussion and what is prescribed is about people showing that they are not racist. That has completely taken over. I understand your disgust, because what you see is people taking over the conversation with this power, maybe because they're embarrassed about the failure of the Great Society and everything that came afterward. I don't know if that part is necessary in the scientific sense. I think that really what it is a lot of very frightened, guilty people who are deeply committed to showing that they're not bad people and will push that. Now, you might call it a certain selfishness in that they will make sure that the conversation only goes in the ways that they think of as important. But you're basically accusing the whole staff of Slate, including the black ones, of being all about power. Jamel Bowie isn't looking for power, for example. This all gets even more complicated when you talk about black identity. But people like Will Salatin and Dahlia Lithwick are not seeking power. However, they are under the sway of this religion. Salatin a little bit less, but we know the sorts of people we're talking about. I don't think they deserve as much contempt as you think, because really all of this is an unintended byproduct of how well the civil rights revolution actually worked. Boy, people got the gospel. They got it too much. All those people who certainly clapped at Aspen after Ta-Nehisi got off that line, which had nothing to do with helping the people getting iced by their brothers and cousins and sisters in the streets of these cities. They are religious people. They were showing that they were good. They're frantic to show that they're not bad people. Does that make that white lady sitting next to you at that event such a bad person? Is she questing for power? That woman's name is, let's give her name is Sarah. Her name is Sarah Brownstein. And she's sitting there clapping at what Ta-Nehisi Coates said. Oh, that was wonderful. Isn't he good? He doesn't want power. She's just guilty. Can't you give Sarah a break?
Well, some want power and some are just like Sarah. Okay, I'll grant you that they're not all Bolsheviks, latter-day Bolsheviks, a part of a movement trying to seize the reins of power. But in their own way, I mean, in the institution at Brown, the question of what can be taught, what can be said, who can say it, what kind of Halloween costume you wear, you don't think that's about power? You don't think you're trying to tell somebody that they can't ridicule you, that they can't make a caricature? I mean, what was that student famously captured in the viral video at Yale yelling at Christakis, the master of the house, which had given offense, his wife had given offense? She's yelling in his face, she's cursing him.
Cursing.
You're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. You don't think boycotts are about power? The idea to ruin people's lives? The witch hunts that go on Twitter and Facebook when somebody is being outed for the wrong political view, that's not the enforcement of that kind of anti-heretical policing is not about power. I actually think that it is. They don't want something on the editorial page of the newspaper. They don't want Bret Stephens writing in the pages of the New York Times in a way that questions their religion about climate change. They want to be able to call anybody who doesn't believe in their policy prescription a climate-denying idiot. And Bret Stephens and the New York Times editorial page are getting in the way. That's not about power. I think that it is. You don't think Charles Blow, in his continuous campaign to try to, prevent the normalization of the electorate's choice of a president in November of 2016, using everything that he can. You don't think the resistance, never Trump, we're going to lay down in the street and prevent, you don't think that's about power? We're not shutting down traffic on the bridge. We're not raining bottles and cans down on police officers because we're trying to control what happens. Anyway, so I'm pushing back.
No. For example, the black girl sleeping at Yale. And, I have never watched that footage because I don't want to hate her. I have never watched it, but I've heard so much about it that I can imagine what it looks like. It's already been reenacted on various TV shows, including Veep. I know a white professor at Yale, and I'm not going to give their name or their gender.
Okay.
But that person thinks of that girl as a hero. I've spoken with that person about that several times. And that person is not about power. That person is somebody very committed to showing that that's enough of these days, they are not a racist. Or Bret Stephens is a great example. You would think he had written the most ignorant screed given the response to that piece. Whether you agree with it or not, it's not denialist in the way people say. If you read what he said, he is taking issue with a certain wing of the argumentation and saying that people have a right to be skeptical of what he calls scientism. It wasn't that bad, but it's being treated as if he's just, a complete flat earther on the matter. Once again, this religion, it isn't only about black people. And part of that religion is also climate science. That has become a religion, too. If you have anything to say against a certain consensus about global warming, I don't happen to, but I've noticed that if you have anything to say against it, no matter how intelligently you put it, you are no longer a civilized person. So you're seeing the same sort of thing. Is it power? They're trying to determine what to put on the page? No, they have to decry the person who says the wrong thing, who says the immoral thing. They have to show that they're good religionists. They have to demonstrate their faith. It's very Martin Luther.
I don't know that we really disagree with one another in that the achievement and the maintenance of power will require the creation of a superstructure. This is probably in Marx somewhere, of ideas and beliefs that are compatible with it. I know it's in Orwell. If it's not in Marx, it's definitely in Orwell. There will have to be propaganda. There will have to be a catechism. There will have to be genuflection. There will have to be totems. There will have to be tropes. There will have to be rituals,
I don't remember that.
and so on. I lost you?
No, I said I don't remember that from Marx, so maybe it's Orwell.
Okay.
If you,
Well, I'm making it up. I don't remember specific
oh, all right.
passages. I'm just saying it's compatible with some lines in the thinking of, and I think of both of these in very different ways. Orwell, the kind of social critic and polemicist, Marx, the deep thinking social philosopher, but the idea that you need a set of beliefs as well as physical instruments and other things. People have to buy into what it is that you're doing. You need legitimacy, right? I mean, the police officers have the gun, but if they don't have legitimacy, that's what the Ferguson effect is arguing. In effect, when legitimacy was withdrawn, they became at risk rather than in being able to effectively discharge their jobs. They became subject to various forces. So they exercised their force, their power, in part resting on a set of beliefs that the police are the good guys and that they're acting on behalf of the public, and so forth and so on.
Power is all right. There are resonances of that word. When you say it's a matter of power, what I'm hearing is people who are insisting that things go their way when they're aware that there are other ways things could go in the minds of other people, but they're deciding it's going to be my way whether you like it or not because I'm bigger than you. And this power is enforced possibly physically or in some way that the populace simply cannot resist. Whereas these people, yes, they are exerting power, they're taking over in what they view as being on the side of the angels. They think what they're doing is progressive in a perfectly, an unequivocal way that there can be no serious argument against. And so they would, if it's power, they consider it a highly benevolent power against which there can be no logical or moral argument. Now, of course, you could say that about Mussolini. You could say that about Hitler. These are people who had a more Hegelian sense of how history is going to move forward, and they thought, well, you're going to need to crack some eggs to make an omelet. I see that, yes, this is power too, but the people in question are not thinking, let's go fuck everybody up and kick some butt and just have it our way because we're bigger than them. If anything, these people, at least until 10 minutes ago, felt smaller. Their idea is we need to have things go our way because it's the morally best way. Not the most efficient, which is something I associate with power, or not just because we're bigger and therefore we can do it and we're just going to go with our id and become Thrasymachus from Plato's Republic. It's going to be, we're exerting this power because it is a moral advancement. Those people test my patience, but I don't see them as walking around with big boots smashing things up, which is what I'm hearing in your use of the word power. Maybe I'm oversimplifying.
They're not there yet, although I think some of the stuff that I've seen go down at Berkeley, at Middlebury for that matter, where there's physical force being applied to people who are trying to express ideas, where they're threatening and so forth. I don't know how that's not violence. I mean, that looks like violence to me. I don't know how that's not mob violence.
Oh,
it looks like mob violence to me. So,
in the name of a higher morality, though, they think that it's in the name of an advancement. And so they think it's okay. They think it's excusable. Their God wouldn't mind. And their God doesn't mind.
I shouldn't mention here that police officers have been assassinated by people who've been inspired by some of these ideas. I shouldn't mention that. I know it's wrong to even call that to the audience's attention, but that kind of thing has happened. I mean, if there is some right-wing fanatic who engages in an act of violence, it's on television 24/7, 365, and everybody in the world knows about it. But when the liberal fascists engage in violence, drag people from their cars and beat them because they have Trump bumper stickers, for example, it gets minimal coverage and it doesn't dwell in the public imagination or become a part of the narrative. I mean,
That's because Sarah's daughter works in the media, and Sarah's daughter is often sitting there thinking, now, how much play are we going to give this? Well, I don't want to seem racist, so I'm just going to leave this alone. She thinks she's doing the right thing in that. What message am I putting out there if I play this story? That's
Okay, I hear you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Demands, this language of demands. We demand this, we demand that. Here's a list of demands, whether it be Black Lives Matter or the student group at some college or whatever. We demand this, we demand that, we demand the other. What is that? Demand or what? Demand or else. Demand or direct action. Demand or I sit in, I occupy the building, I make life miserable. I shut this MF down. I shut it down. When the students organized themselves to prevent Ray Kelly from speaking, it became known at Brown. One of the leaders is quoted. You can find her on the YouTube saying this. She says, we asked them to shut it down. They wouldn't do it, so we shut it down for them. We shut it down. We shut the mother down. That's not about power. That's not about force. That's violence.
Power in the name of a moral good. They think they're doing good with that power, which is why I feel differently about it. I mean, the list of demands, it's Luther, pinning stuff to the door. The idea being, here is what I demand, and I am correct in a way that's going to move history forward. And he did. These people are thinking of it in that way. And so it's harder for me to see them as exerting their power as if they were toddlers.
Okay, can I shift the, we only got a few minutes left, I think. Your time is like my time. So let me shift it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to give up on the power thing. You and I disagree, or maybe I'm just making a fetish out of what's...
You just dislike them more than I do.
Well, that's probably true. I want to talk about identity and, identity politics. And I want to ask you how your scheme of, religious, performative, self-expressive, whatever, relates to the rise of identity. So transgender persons being accepted as who they are, and where, and who they are need not line up with what their physical, biological inheritance might be. And the not recognizing them as such, not using the right pronoun, this would put it in a very kind of concrete and specific context. I insist that you refer to me as not he or not she, but some other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I object. Say I object. Say I don't want to use the right pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's put the power thing aside. I want to talk about the identity thing. The notion that being recognized for who I am becomes the touchstone of me being treated rightly, and a failure to so do, a failure to account for my particular investment. I'm not, if I say to somebody, you say you're gay, I don't care. That's a homophobic act. That's a microaggression. Somebody tells me, don't tell me your sexuality. Don't ask, don't tell is what I'll get back from them. Oh, it's don't ask, don't tell, is it? They'll say. So I want to talk about that, but I'm afraid that the delivery that I scheduled is probably about to happen, so I'm going to have to go in a minute or two.
Yeah, we should just pick this up in another one, but I think that it's the triumph of individualism, and I have no problem with these new issues of what pronoun to use and changing conceptions of gender identity. It can be tricky. I'm still learning the language.
Christopher Lasch, the Culture of Narcissism. You ever read that book?
I've pretended to read it. And I don't think that's necessarily what I mean, despite the fact that by narcissism, he doesn't mean exactly what the dictionary definition means. But I think that we are taking our general quest for individual dignity and concern with the individual further than anybody would have assumed was going to be the case 50 years ago. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, I'm all for it, although it can be confusing to be living through the times when such changes are happening. But this, we should...
Can we make this the subject of our next conversation in a few weeks?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Thanks for putting up with my ranting, John. And audience, I apologize. I'm sorry, but this is my home turf. They're messing with my home ground here. I'm talking about the university, which is supposed to be an institution where we really explore these ideas and get to the bottom of things. So
Glenn,
I'm worked up about it.
Something else that we should talk about doesn't happen at my university. And I've been trying to figure out why Columbia has not had any of this, not to any significant extent. Murray came and spoke here a couple weeks later.
I see.
It just doesn't happen. So that's another topic. But for today, get your delivery, and I'm going to run home and feed my kids.
Thanks a lot, John. Signing off. Always a pleasure. Thanks for putting up with me, man.
Please. To be continued. It's perfectly all right.